over here in the big red letters, yes. The Kieran Theater is home to many Broadway productions, musicals, and plays. But the curtains closed here for a young man named Hewlett Tarr on November 29th, 1933. You see, Mr. Tarr was just ending his shift that night. He'd been counting the minutes until he could leave to a Thanksgiving wedding, and he was working the box office upstairs inside. All this was happening while a criminal walked in. A criminal by the name of Eddie Anderson. And him and his fiancée, Dorothy Reed, run upstairs, shove their gun through the bars of the teller cage, and they say, "Give me 2 tickets to tonight's play." Well, naturally, Hewlett complied, but unfortunately, as he was pulling his gun out of the teller cage, it caught on the railing and fired. Tarr, wounded, fell backwards down the stairs and died. And Anderson, on the other hand, well, he led police on a wild chase that eventually led him into hiding in the Sunset District. But it's like they always say, the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. And especially when he's got 2 free tickets. So, indeed, Anderson appeared a block away 2 weeks later and held up a bank at gunpoint, demanding $1,981. And when he got the cash, he fled, just for 2 passing police officers to see him and open fire. He shot an inspector before getting taken down himself and arrested for murder. Well, the headlines were demanding a quick conviction. Kieran Killer must hang. And within weeks, he was taken off to San Quentin. Not the famed prison, but the city, where he was promptly hanged and buried. That was the end of him, but it wasn't the end of Hewlett Tarr. You see, the manager of the Kieran for the past 20 years is a woman named Tess Collins. And often she'll have patrons coming up to her and asking, "Who is that dapper young fellow?" "What dapper young fellow?" she'll ask. And they'll say, "Well, as I was entering the theater, I looked into the big mirror on the wall and saw a very handsome young man dressed in 1930s clothing. But when I go to greet him, he's not there." Tess just laughs and says, "That's because he's not there. That's Hewlett Tarr, and he died 80 years ago." And you'll see, as this is found, we have the Pine Crest. You see, the Pine Crest Diner is an excellent 24-hour restaurant where one can get almost anything that one desires for breakfast. But there is one glaring omission from the menu: poached eggs. You see, on July 24th, 1997, which really wasn't that long ago, an attractive woman walked into the Pinecrest Diner and took a seat at the counter and placed an order for 2 poached eggs. The chef at the time, named Hashem Zayed, accepted the order even though poached eggs weren't on the menu. And as he began preparing the eggs, a waitress named Helen Montague intervened and was like, "You can't do this, man. This is not okay." And then she took it further and began shouting and berating him in front of customers and other employees, and the whole restaurant fell silent. Everyone just watching the public humiliation of a poor romantic cook, and all seemingly over poached eggs. Well, after his shift that day, Zayed did not go to his apartment a few blocks away. And he didn't go to his job at the Market Street Cinema. No, he went to a nearby card room and started an all-night gambling binge in which he lost thousands of dollars and stayed awake all night until the next morning, where he started his shift at the Pinecrest. He sees the waitress from the day before sitting at the counter drinking her morning coffee. He takes a seat next to her and can't help but bring up the egg situation from the day before. And again, the two argue until, frustrated, Helen stands up and demands that he go outside and get some air. Calm down. Well, Zayed looks at her, gets up and walks towards the door. But then he stops. He turns around and he pulls a .38 caliber handgun from his breast pocket and shoots her 5 times. And then after, He just walks outside and sits on that curb right there and waits for police to arrest him. He died in prison 3 years later of a brain tumor. Beyond that, we don't really know what the motive was beyond the poached eggs. But, you know, the restaurant doesn't say anything about the murder on the menu. But one thing you might notice on the breakfast menu in tiny font on the top, it says, "We regret to inform you that we do not prepare poached eggs." And with that, I guess you're not getting poached eggs up there. I hear there's another restaurant over there that makes them if anyone was just hankering for them because of that story. You know where not to get them now, so.
It's true. To die for, you could say.
Yeah, to die for.
Any questions before we make our way to the next stop?
No?
Awesome. Follow me, y'all.